Index podcast is brought to you by our staking partner, Marinade Finance. Their latest release, Marinade Select, offers a smarter way to stake, featuring a curated set of high-performing mid-size validators handpicked for yield, professionalism, and their role in making Solana faster and more resilient. Learn more and start staking at marinade.finance. Hey everybody, welcome to the Index. I'm your host, Alex Kehaya, and today I'm joined by special guest Cosmo Jiang, GP at Pantera Capital, one of the most respected investment firms in crypto, known for backing foundational projects across the blockchain infrastructure, DeFi, and Web3. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Alex. I mean, you guys do such amazing work across Solana, so I'm really grateful to be here.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, as many of you guys know, I've been in the Solana ecosystem since early 2021. And what you might not know is somehow I ended up at the forefront of both agentic payments and digital asset treasury companies on Solana over the summer. And so I'm really excited to have Cosmo and Pantera on the show because they recently announced that they closed with HSDT Helios, which is a NASDAQ company, to build a $500 million DAT. And I want to get into that with you, but one thing I would like to highlight is just how incredible Pantera is as a investment company. You've created $4.9 billion in direct profits for investors, plus 105,000 Bitcoins distributed in kind. So that's $3.2 billion in cash that's gone back to investors and 105,000 BTC. I mean, I don't know historically like where that lands for investors, but you know what you're doing and you know how to create returns for investors, which makes you extremely well positioned to launch a Solana DAT, digital asset treasury company. So why don't we start here? Why are you in this space? Like going back to your starting and your roots in crypto in general, what gets you out of bed in the morning to do what you do and be here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thanks for that generous description of Pantera. I'd say I have played one small part of it, but certainly a lot of the credit goes to, all the work that's gone into building this incredible brand and all the work we've done over time. As far as I go, I'm really an investor by training. Like I have what many would consider a very classically TradFi background. I studied math at Harvard and then did banking and then private equity. And then most of my career, I've been a long short equity. And so a hedge fund investor investing in public stocks, right? And specifically in consumer and internet. And so that meant I covered everything from Costco or Macy's all the way up to Warner Media or Amazon or Google. And so it's a pretty rich, interesting set. And so deep down, I'm really a tech investor. And crypto for me was always interesting, but never really top of mind until really 2020 and 2021, when all of a sudden everyone in my coverage universe started talking about crypto, whether that was Facebook or Spotify, or Universal Music or LVMH or Nike. And so all of a sudden became incumbent upon me to get really smart on crypto very quickly. And as I did, I was like, wow, there's actually so much really cool innovation and so many real businesses being built. And there's a real opportunity to start applying that fundamental traditional finance skill set that I had built over time, but really apply it to digital assets in a way that hadn't been done before. And so with that sort of inspiration, I decided to enter the crypto space. I launched my own fund, and then shortly thereafter decided to merge forces with the team here at Pantera and and now lead investment strategy here.
Super cool story. And talk to me more about, before we get into the specifics of what a digital asset treasury company is, talk to me more about Solana. Like, what's the conviction in Solana? Why? What is Solana, number one? And then why? Why Solana?
Yeah. Solana is a layer one blockchain that is a software platform on which I think all future financial applications and many consumer applications will be built, right? So it is this base layer protocol on which a lot of things will get constructed and innovated on. That's super exciting. As an investor, you learn that investing in platforms are some of the most scalable type businesses as long as they build a powerful network effect. And I think we're seeing that with Solana. Now, when I think about Solana versus there are many blockchain protocols, layer ones, and when I think about Solana versus everyone else, I realize the investment thesis is actually very simple. It goes back to something that I'd learned. One of the big stocks of my career when I was an internet investor was Amazon. right? When you go to Amazon, one of their driving forces and missions was something that Jeff Bezos used to always say, which is there's this holy trinity of consumer wants that will never change, and that is they want faster, they want cheaper, and they want more accessible. And that's exactly what Solana is. I'm like, wow, it's faster than many blockchains. It's certainly faster than our traditional payment rails. It's cheaper and it's more accessible. Anyone in the world with a smartphone and an internet connection can access the Solana wallet. And so for me, the clarity of vision for Solana is so obvious and so easy to understand that it's as compelling an investment as Amazon was in 2010.
Yeah, well, I 100% agree, and I saw this back in 2021 when I decided to come work on the ecosystem. And I think one other thing that you didn't bring up that I think is really important to say here is that oftentimes good marketing and good sales can beat good tech. That is not what has happened here. I mean, I think what they've done really well in Solana and what Tolly and Raj did was balance shipping product and getting users and getting builders building on it, and then solving all these hard problems over time. Where it is today, it's super stable, it's high throughput, but more than anything else, it also has all the users. I mean, it makes orders of magnitude more revenue every month, every day than all other blockchains combined. And just to give you a quick data point from my friend Vibhu, who leads product marketing over at the Solana Foundation, he tweeted this today. In 1 year, from 2020 to 2021, Solana revenue grew 543x from $50,000 to $28 million. And then again, in a single year, from 2023 to 2024, revenue grew from 48x from 28 million to 1.4 billion. That's network revenue. That's protocol revenue. On top of that, what that's not even accounting for is the number of companies that have gone from 0 to 100 million plus in revenue in like record time. Like, I think some of the fastest growing companies in the history of humanity are all happening on Solana. And to me, that's the thing that gives me the conviction, right? On top of the good tech, it's fast, it's cheap, it's reliable, is it also has all the users. The distribution is there.
I think that's exactly right. And those are very tied, right? It's like, what do consumers want? They want faster, cheaper, more convenient. And because Solana is that's why it's actually taken the lion's share of all incremental growth in blockchain usage. One of the most important things that growth investors look for is like, who is taking the most market share at this existing time? It's not about who has the most, it's not about the static starting point. It's about, as we go each month, each quarter, each year, who's taking the most incremental market share. And on that basis, over the last 2 years, Solana's been taking the lion's share of incremental new users, incremental transactions, incremental profitability. And so very clearly, even if the starting point for Solana is different than other protocols, it is so clearly the market share leader on an incremental basis. And that's why it's exciting as a growth investor. And then the other point, which is exactly what you said, which is that it's already actually prodigiously profitable. I think the stat that you mentioned from Vibhu, $1.5 billion of revenue, that's an incredible amount of free cash flow and revenue, right? For something that it's actually the most profitable L1 blockchain. And so on that basis, it's very, very compelling for a fundamental investor. And the reason that we are launching HSDT Helios, our Solana DAT, is because we think we have a responsibility to tell that very compelling fundamental story to Main Street investors and really advocate on behalf of Solana.
And that last part is the reason why I came around to digital asset treasury companies. I was actually kind of skeptical earlier this summer when I first started getting recruited to work with a couple of these different ones. And but then I came to realize that they are a really important vehicle for educating everyone, retail and institutional investors, about the value of the thing we've been working on together for the last, decade, not just Solana, but crypto in general. It's kind of a big coming out party. I feel like now that we've got shifting regulatory winds from something that has been really restrictive to now it's becoming tailwinds, where we can do a lot more in this industry. It's opening a lot of doors for us. My next question I wanted to ask though is about your decision to do a digital asset treasury company in the first place. Like, Pantera is a fund traditionally, right? You're investing in companies, you're investing in tokens. You have had conviction early in many things, and digital asset treasury companies is one of them. Like, by the time I met you guys and talking about your digital asset treasury company, you'd already put like, I don't know, $300 million into various DATs. That's way ahead of many other investors, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my intuition there. So what what about digital asset treasury companies in general is exciting to Pantera? And then why did you decide to do your own?
Yeah. To our understanding, we have been the most active by far crypto native investor across DATs. And the reason for that goes back to we were just fortunate and at the right place, right time to be early. I think a lot of this goes back to my traditional training as a TradFi investor. I know equities like the back of my hand. I've lived in SEC filings all my life. And so with the advent of digital asset treasuries, which are really just a token wrapped in an equity wrapper, it felt like something that I understood very, very well, and perhaps understood a little faster than a classic crypto venture investor. And so when the first one came around, I'd always thought that I'd gone to the point where I thought, wow, it really makes sense for the MicroStrategy business model. Actually does make sense. I can underwrite it and understand why it can persist. And then, by the way, it would make way more sense for something like Solana than MicroStrategy than Bitcoin. And so when DFDV, the first US DAT, came around, we took what was then an extremely non-consensus bet to back them and really try to create the first US DAT outside of MicroStrategy, but backed by Solana. DFDV found tremendous success. And we thought at the time that it'd be one and done. I was like, man, this is like really out there. I don't think there's going to be anything else like this. But it turns out that everyone saw the great success of DFDV, and then the ball kept rolling, and we're sitting here 150 pitches later, $10 billion of capital raised for DATs later, and tens of billions of dollars of value created. Just like, wow, I'm so humbled by that early decision of us anchoring this investment has really created this massive industry that's been so value creating for crypto. And during that time, because we were early and because we had people view us as having that intellectual credibility, we raised additional capital to really tackle this opportunity. And as we generated really strong returns. We deployed over $300 million of capital, deployed over 15 deals, including some of the leading ones like ETH at BitMine. With ETH, we really helped anchor and helped bring Tom Lee's vision to life. We just came to the realization this late July, early August, on looking back that, wow, like this incredible success that ETH has seen on the back of BitMine's efforts, we'd love to see that for Solana. And then I just took a step back and thought, wait a minute, we built all this expertise. We've been the guys that everyone consults to see how to set up a DAT. Why don't we put in some elbow grease and actually just go out and do it ourselves? And so that's why it came together. Is we'd build this incredible expertise. We have this credibility. We know all the nuances of like what makes something work, what makes something not work. And then we feel so passionately about Solana. It's our biggest position at the firm that we felt like it was our responsibility to really bring HSDT to life.
Yeah, and I think one thing people might get confused about is like there are all these DATs coming out, and some of them might seem competitive. Like we just saw Galaxy launch, right? And they did a billion, almost $1.5 billion in SOL purchases in like 4 days. And then they just announced they have a $4 billion ATM. Well, this is actually a really good thing for Pantera's DAT and any other large DAT that comes into the space, because these things are like honey holes for SOL. They're just grabbing SOL, buying it and staking it and growing the ecosystem. And I think that's really interesting. It creates this flywheel effect. And one thing I do want to dig into with you is why you said something interesting earlier, that a SOL DAT would be better than a Bitcoin DAT. Can you dig into that like a little bit deeper, talk about yield and why you think Solana is a better network and token for a digital asset treasury play?
If you go to the core of what makes a DAT work, or the business model of a DAT, it's all about maximizing the amount of growth in Solana per share for a Solana DAT or Bitcoin per share for a Bitcoin DAT. And how do you do that? It's by creating or generating yield. And when you look at Bitcoin, how MicroStrategy has done it historically is primarily through financial engineering, which is a very powerful tool. It's selling stock selling stock at a premium, or selling volatility through convertible debt. We intend to do plenty of that with HSDT and realize that is one of the strongest drivers of performance. Anyone who starts with that without realizing that is the core driver is sort of missing the point. So we care about that a lot. But what makes Solana special relative to Bitcoin is that you don't have to only rely on financial engineering. Solana actually can be by itself a productive asset. And so you can go out and stake your Solana. You can go out and lend your Solana on Solana DeFi. And so there are all these other ways to generate a baseline yield that gives you more sustainability than just relying on financial engineering, which is more markets driven. And so that's what makes a Solana DAT actually more sustainable. Is when the reason why things trade at a premium is because people believe that there's persistent growth that you can underwrite, right? That's why you apply a multiple to something. And because there's this persistent growth driven by DeFi, driven by staking, Solana DATs deserve to trade at a higher premium than Bitcoin DATs on like just mathematical logical basis.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that it's really important to highlight that staking component and the yield that you can generate just natively on Solana. This is how the economics of Solana work. And because Sol, it has so much usage, because so many users are using the network and generating revenue on it, you can get really good yields. I think another thing you talked about is DeFi. And I think one of the things I've been most excited about is that these digital asset treasury companies, Pantera is included, the Helios DAT, can leverage new innovative things in DeFi that are not possible on the NASDAQ when they start issuing some of their float on mainnet. And this is something that I'm not sure if you guys have plans to do this, but I expect probably you will. But I've been talking about it a lot with Superstate, and they're one of the teams that are enabling this kind of issuance. Imagine in the future soon, not too far away, maybe like 3 to 6 months, I think, being able to generate yield off of trading fees, of volume of your own stock with your own MSOL, like if that's a liquid staking pool, on an automated market maker. And this is going to fly over people's heads, but like essentially on the NASDAQ, if you're an equity, publicly traded equity in the NASDAQ, you can't generate yield off of volume. You can't generate revenue or capture any value from that. But in decentralized finance, you can. And it's something we've been doing that you guys probably have experience being a liquidity provider with tokens that you've invested in. Now you can do that with your own equity and your own token, and so can all your token holders. And I think that that's really, really interesting. I'm wondering if you thought about that kind of strategy to add additional, like to stack additional yield on top.
Yeah, I want to be careful about what we say about our future plans. Obviously, HSDT is a publicly traded company, but I'd say stuff like tokenization really excites us. And that the ability to have that's the whole power of Solana, right? That's the whole point, is we want as much of what we're doing to live on Solana as possible. And that includes our equity. The ability to have your equity and do things in different ways on DeFi, I think is a very powerful tool. Everything that you said about what Superstate is doing, what Xdocs is doing is all, I think, definitely a powerful tool that we can have in our back pocket that a typical equity won't.
Yeah, and just for everybody listening, like I have no inside knowledge here of any of your plans outside of that you're doing a DAT and what's been publicly announced and like in the PR, the press releases. So I'm mainly speculating on what I've heard other people talking about doing with different digital asset treasury companies. And also what I'm just seeing with equities coming on chain, like it's happening. And because these regulatory tailwinds, the SEC is starting to approve these things. They're starting to approve peer-to-peer transfers, participation in liquidity pools, things like that. And I think there just couldn't be a better time to be doing this.
Oh, I totally agree. The whole, everything you're saying is totally logical. And I think what you should expect from a DAT that's high performing. And one of the biggest things that's characterized the markets this year at large is just the equity markets and the equity regulators' embrace of DeFi and of crypto. Like that has been so exciting, right? You see that in the strong performance of Coinbase and Robinhood. You see that in the extremely strong performance of crypto-related IPOs like Circle or Bullish or Gemini or Figure. And then you're seeing that in digital asset treasuries that are coming to market, and the extreme amount of interest and excitement and true big money participation in DATs just speaks to, man, the equity markets are really embracing digital assets. And part of that is because there's this regulatory opening up, this idea that the US is now open for business for digital asset companies.
So one, totally agree. Two, I know there's other digital asset treasuries coming. Some of them for like alt tokens, like there's ETH, BTC, and Solana. How would you, like, as somebody who's worked with LPs pretty extensively, how would you advise people when they're like looking at which ones to participate in and what to look for? And I mean, I think Pantera, your DAT that you're launching now is an obvious one, but what would you say to them, like how they should be evaluating these things?
The way that I like to think about it, and this is, from the vantage point of what do I think makes the optimal DAT and what makes a really perform. Number one is having the appropriate underlying token, right? A DAT has no reason to exist if no one wants to buy the underlying token. And whether people want to buy the underlying token or not is because your goal is to advocate this to Main Street retail and mainstream financial media. it actually has to have fundamentals. I think a lot of crypto people get this wrong, where they've lived in crypto for so long, and it's crazy to me that this is even a debate of whether fundamentals matter or not. If you ever said that in the real world, people would think you're crazy. Obviously, fundamentals are the only thing that matters. And so if your goal is to launch a DAT, you better make sure that the underlying token is something that has a really great fundamental story. And that's why we chose Solana, right? Solana has such a great fundamental story. It's doing 3 billion of annualized free cash flow, trades at 40 times run rate earnings, taking market share, kicking ass, has all these use cases. And so that's why we think Solana is very compelling. So that's number one, is when you're thinking about a DAT, make sure the underlying token has real fundamental traction. I think number two is like thinking about the setup of the DAT. What makes a DAT work is really about velocity. Scale matters at some point, but what matters way more is your starting point and your velocity of growth. Because the faster you grow, the higher the multiple you can attract, and the higher the multiple that you have, the more they can keep the financial flywheel going. And so that's why, when we're thinking about it, we wanted to launch what we think is a large but moderate size, right? We think 500 million is exactly the right amount to go with. If you launch too big, you just can't grow that fast. Obviously, if you're bigger, you can't grow as fast. And if you're small, there are some issues with being too small too. And so we think our size was very purposeful. And so looking for DATs at the early stages that are growing with high velocity is the second piece. And then the third is really like your ability to speak to the market, and especially speak to a new set of investors. The whole goal of DATs is not to speak to the same crypto natives who already owned an underlying token. It's to speak to everyone who hasn't really learned about why Solana is amazing yet and just needs someone to tell them. And so it's going out, advocating for the token, talking about why it's excellent, and talking about it to mainstream retail and mainstream investors. And so, one thing I evaluate is like, how well can this team really speak to that audience? How much reach does this team have with that TradFi audience? And we're hopeful that with HSDT, we can manage that.
So you made a bunch of good points, but one of the numbers that sticks out, you talk about fundamentals, right? In assessing fundamentals, we already kind of covered the fundamentals of Solana, why that's the right token. But let's talk about HSDT fundamentals. You made the announcement, like a couple days ago, and it did 500 million in cumulative trading volume since the announcement. That is, I think, the highest trading liquidity of any Solana Treasury company. And you just talked about velocity, right? One thing I've seen with these DAT launches, like not all of them trade equally, right? Sometimes they don't have a ton of volume, but you guys did. Why do you think that? What do you attribute that to?
I think it really comes down to our ability to execute on the plan. Our goal is, the market has gotten smarter with DATs over time, is trying to find the sponsors and the teams that are really well positioned, and also the right setups, right? The right size, the right deal structure, all that really matters in generating excitement from aftermarket TradFi buyers. The other piece is, we care, if the number one goal of a DAT is relies on making sure the underlying token story is told, we wanted to make sure we were telling the Solana story very aggressively from day one. And so we showed up on TV on day one. We showed up on TV on day two. We're talking to amazing hosts like yourself just to tell our story and tell the Solana story. And I think that's why, we're going to be very focused on continuing to hit the ground running very hard to talk about why Solana is excellent and why HSDT is one of the best ways to express that Solana view.
How big do you think this space gets for these digital asset treasury companies? Like, I don't know how you measure that. Maybe it's from a market cap standpoint, but you said it was already 10 billion. I think you said earlier in the show. How big does this get?
Yeah, the stats are, it's actually been close to $15 billion of capital raised for new DATs. And wow, in total, DATs, if you exclude MicroStrategy, which is the granddaddy at 100 billion, excluding MicroStrategy, the new DATs have already gone to $80 billion of market cap. That's not a small industry anymore. Yeah. I think there's a real opportunity for there to be 2 or 3 very large DATs for each of the large cap assets, so Bitcoin, ETH, and Sol. I think the white space for Sol is still wide open, and that's why we're launching HSDT and really going after it, because there's this opportunity to build, the MicroStrategy of Bitcoin, the Bitmine of ETH. We think HSDT can be that for Solana, and so that's why there's this huge white space still left for us. And when we think about where we can get to, we're starting with $500 million of capital. We have this baked-in ability to call an additional 750 to get us to $1 billion of capital. And we think there's a real opportunity to be 5-10% of total Solana float, right? And so Solana today is around 150 billion market cap. We think this could be, 7.5, $15 billion market cap business. And we're really trying to execute hard to hit that target.
One of the really interesting things from my viewpoint about these digital asset treasury companies is the people who are behind them are crypto native people. Like you started out in traditional finance, but now you're a crypto native. You've been in this space for a long time, and so has the rest of the Pantera team. And I'm curious, like, you guys know this ecosystem, you know how to contribute. You've helped a ton of founders and companies, like over 200 portfolio companies, get to market. What's the plan for the Helios DAT to contribute to the ecosystem beyond obviously buying SOL and staking SOL? Like, how do you see your digital asset treasury company and others being able to have like a positive impact outside of just the core operations of the digital asset treasury strategy?
HSDT's number one mission, is maximizing shareholder value. And the way to get to maximizing shareholder value for a DAT, if that's mission 1A is advocating as hard as we can for Solana and making sure that Solana can grow in a healthy, sustainable way. And in service of doing that, one is we want to tell as many people about spreading the good word of why Solana is an amazing place to build, amazing place to use applications, amazing place to just explore how you can innovate and change our financial system. And then, so the advocacy is number one. And two, we want to put our money wherever our mouth is. And so it's really deploying our assets in a productive way to grow the Solana pie. And whether that's participating in DeFi, whether that's staking, or whether that's incubating new businesses that could be really large and additive to the Solana ecosystem as a whole. All those things are responsibilities that we take very seriously, all in service of maximizing shareholder value and maximizing Solana.
So, we're getting towards the top of the show here, bumping up against the half-hour mark. And I always ask this question, and it's, what have I not asked you that I should have asked or that you wanted to talk about related to the digital asset treasury companies or Pantera or anything really?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is just understanding what makes a DAT work. And it's really about your ability to tell the story and evangelize Solana to a new set of investors. And so I think, when you're looking at a DAT, it's really about, do they have a methodical plan to go out and talk to new people? It's about expanding your reach beyond the crypto natives. And so we're going to do our best to really tackle that and go after it in a big way. I think something that maybe you should have asked that maybe you were too polite to ask is, a lot of people think DATs are, a Ponzi and not going to make it. And my response to that is, actually, these businesses look a lot like banks. If you think about what a bank is, and I started my career covering banks and insurance companies, these balance sheet heavy financial institutions, they're actually just a pot of cash, and they're just going out trying to maximize their returns. And using that pot of cash, if they can generate a return above their cost of capital, then they trade above 1x book value. And if they don't, they trade below 1x book value. That's why JP Morgan trades at 2x, because they generate strong returns, and XYZ regional bank trades less than 1x because they don't generate strong returns. And so I think it's very natural that over time you will see many DATs get launched, but not many of them will reach that high tier of exceeding your cost of capital and generating strong returns. But those that do deserve to trade at a premium to book, just like other banks and insurance companies do. And so I think having that well-rounded understanding of these actually look exactly like a huge other industry is helpful for understanding why the premiums are sustainable and why you got to really be filtering for the best-in-class operators.
I mean, I really love that analogy, and I wouldn't have thought about that because I haven't spent any of the time that you have in analyzing banks. And I think if any team is going to be able to create those kinds of returns for investors, it's probably you guys. I mean, the Pantera Bitcoin fund alone generated over 1,000x since inception, and you guys have done this repeatedly now. So anyway, that is to say, I believe you, and I believe in what you guys are doing, and I'm really excited for what you're going to do for the Solana ecosystem. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
No, thanks so much for having me, Alex. Thank you for all the work that you do in the Solana ecosystem and allowing us to share the story of why we're so excited about HSDT, what it can do for Solana, what it can do for our shareholders.
Anytime. Would love to have you back on maybe in like 6 months or something to check in on where the market is and to share more, and anything you guys need, I'm here for it.
Awesome. Yeah, let's pin that in the calendar.